What do you do when your 3-day special military operation turns into a 4-year-plus beating? Why, fake it until you make it, of course. That's been Russia's approach so often during the Ukraine war, and it always gets exposed. And guess what? It's happened again. Russia's elite soldiers tried to stage a fake victory in the Zaporizhzhia region. Ukraine showed those elites what a real defeat looks like. The fake was turned into a funeral. Russia thought it had everything figured out. Toward the end of May, Russia deployed reconnaissance units from its Airborne Forces. Their target, Stepnohirsk, which is a settlement that has been contested for much of the war. These weren't any old units that Russia sent. The tactic of pushing cannon fodder onto the front to get destroyed by Ukraine's drones wasn't the play here. For once, Russia sent units that are widely believed to be among the elite in its military. Russia's airborne forces are capable. They're paratroopers who have trained for operations just like this, and their goal was simple: storm Stepnohirsk and score a major propaganda victory for Putin at a time that he needed it the most. And we know that the goal was propaganda because the units that Russia sent were all carrying the flags of their country. We've seen this from Russia before. It sends in soldiers to infiltrate, has them raise the flag and take a few photos, and then those soldiers scurry away and hide after creating the false narrative that they have scored a major victory for the Kremlin. But in Stepnohirsk, Ukraine wasn't having any of it. As the Russian units crept forward, Ukraine was keeping watch. Unknown to Putin's patsies, those troops weren't storming toward a propaganda victory. They were heading into a trap. And when it was ready, Ukraine sprang that trap expertly. Before any of that was revealed, Russia's Stepnohirsk assaulters had done everything by the book when it comes to special forces operations. It all seemed to be going exactly as planned. Putin's stormtroopers waited until they had the cover of nightfall, which was supposed to make them harder to spot. Each soldier was equipped with anti-thermal camouflage to mask their heat signatures, and they even waited for a night when it was raining, adding an extra layer of cover and potentially making it more difficult for Ukraine's drones to spot them. Those soldiers knew exactly what they were doing, and they were doing exactly what they were supposed to do. There may have been smiles on Russian faces for a while. Then, Ukraine struck. Operatives from the HUR's Artan Special Forces unit made their presence known to the wannabe Russian occupiers. Artan didn't attack immediately. Ukraine's own special forces knew that they had Putin's soldiers surrounded, so they made them an offer. Surrender now and you can survive this war. But surrender is rarely an option for Russian soldiers, especially if they believe that they'll be sent back to the Kremlin's clutches. Russia has criminalized voluntary surrender, with soldiers now facing up to 10 years in prison if they give up when Ukraine tells them to raise the white flag. If these Russian soldiers were part of the rank and file, they might have risked the gulag to survive. However, the Stepnohirsk infiltrators were part of Russia's elite. Dying for their leader has been drilled into them from the beginning of their training. So the offer to surrender was refused. Instead, Russia's soldiers opened fire. What followed was an absolute bloodbath. HUR's Artan unit showed no mercy. And in a second blow to Putin's attempts to create positive propaganda, Ukraine has ensured that there is no doubt about what happened in Stepnohirsk in late May. We don't just have a report from HUR itself to confirm what happened on that fateful night, we have footage. A lot of footage. We see the view shot from armored vehicles and tanks as Ukraine's soldiers roll in. Those vehicles were even hit with enemy blasts, though they survived and continued to move forward. Artan says that it was facing troops who possessed heavy weaponry and superior equipment, but none of it made a difference. Ukraine's troops were able to enter Stepnohirsk and they conducted a clearing operation for the ages. Dividing into small units, those soldiers checked house by house, looking for the Russian infiltrators. Scouts ran ahead, looking for signs of movements. Assault units followed, ripping apart the Russian units piece by piece. By the end, Ukraine stood victorious and Putin's great propaganda mission had fallen flat on its face. Russia's elite came for glory, but they ended up following 1.4 million of their comrades and counting into the great beyond. As for Artan, its commander says that the Russian forces were tricked into walking straight into what he calls a fire pocket, and that they were wholly unprepared for what awaited them. The so-called elite of the Russian army proved unprepared to face the systematic defense of HUR, thanks to the dedication and professionalism of the soldiers, as well as coordinated cooperation with adjacent units of HUR's Active Operations Department and Ukraine's defense forces. Our positions in the area of responsibility remain unbreached, proclaimed Artan commander Viktor Tokochuk. Putin wanted to send a fake message to Ukraine, his own people, and the rest of the world. Ukraine delivered a brutally real response to show Putin that even his most elite soldiers can be caught out and eliminated. What we've seen from Ukraine here is the brilliance of its military tacticians stacked up against the best of the best that Russia has to offer. Ukraine came out on top. The implications here are huge. For Ukraine to have set the trap that Russia's paratroopers fell into, it had to know that Russia's elites were coming in the first place. Despite all of the precautions, and even though Russian soldiers followed the special forces approach by the book, Ukraine had them scouted all the way and was able to deliver justice. Luring an enemy into an ambush is far from a new military tactic. Ambushes have been carried out for centuries, but rarely has such a feat been carried out with such panache, documented so well, and conducted against soldiers that are supposed to be so good that they're meant to see situations like these coming. Ukraine pulled off a masterstroke. Putin must be absolutely livid. And he should be, because there are plenty of reasons why Russia sent the best that it had to claim Stepnohirsk. Yes, it was about propaganda, and we're going to be getting to all of that. But it was also about something so much more for Russia. You see, Stepnohirsk isn't any old settlement. It's been contested for years, and at times, Russia has held a legitimate claim to holding Stepnohirsk. However, that had changed in mid-May, prompting the painful propaganda march on which Putin ordered his soldiers. Let's head back to May 18th. On that date, Censor.net reported that Ukraine's security and defense forces had regained complete control over Stepnohirsk. The Artan unit was heavily involved again. Working alongside adjacent units, Artan had driven the Russian occupiers out completely, meaning that Stepnohirsk was under the full control of Ukraine's military for the first time in months. The situation in the settlement had been stabilized, and to rub salt into the wounds, footage of the liberation operation was released, showing how Russia's infiltrators had been destroyed by Artan and Ukraine's other units. That defeat stung Putin. Stepnohirsk is one of the most strategically significant settlements in the Zaporizhzhia region. It's located just 30 kilometers south of Zaporizhzhia, meaning it can serve as a launching pad for assaults on a region that Putin is desperate to claim. Holding Stepnohirsk would also give Russia some control over the north-south E105 highway, which could be used for logistics as well as offer a faster route into Zaporizhzhia. Russia has been trying to use the settlement as part of an ongoing advance towards Zaporizhzhia, which includes movements across the eastern bank of the Dnipro River toward the town of Primorsk. The goal was to bring Zaporizhzhia into artillery range. Ukraine destroyed that goal on May 18th. Deprived of what would have been a very real strategic victory for Russia on May 18th, Putin and his commanders came up with an alternate plan. If you can't win, fake it. That's what we saw in late May. The elites that Russia sent into Stepnohirsk were meant to create a fake narrative that Russia still had a measure of control in the settlement. They failed, and for Putin, that failure has terrible consequences. Russia's leader is a man who is crying out for some positive propaganda right now, but he just keeps on getting exposed by Ukraine. But before we dig deeper into all of that, this is a quick reminder that you're watching The Military Show. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, now's the perfect time to pause and hit the button before we get back to it. So why was Putin so desperate for propaganda that he was willing to send his best soldiers to Stepnohirsk to die in the off chance that the Kremlin would receive a picture of a Russian flag raised in the settlement? To answer that, we need to explore the role that propaganda plays in Russia and the sorry situation that Putin now finds himself in. For Putin, the message is everything. When he controls the narrative, reality doesn't matter. His goal always is to hide the reality of what's happening in Ukraine and even the wider world from his own people. That's how he maintains his support. It's rarely through action and often through lies that Putin retains his grip on the Russian seat of power. And if his propaganda is able to fool other powerful people into believing the Russian narrative about what's happening in Ukraine, then all the better. That's all leverage for Putin which he can bring to bear during peace negotiations or use to convince other nations to pressure Ukraine into surrendering territory that Russia claims to hold. The power of Putin's propaganda is felt all the way down to the military that he has sent into Ukraine. In April, the Atlantic Council reported on a study conducted by a Ukrainian non-governmental organization, Lingva Lexa, alongside Ukraine's Office of the Prosecutor General. They analyzed survey data gathered from more than 1,000 Russian POWs, and they found that soldiers who endorsed the propaganda that Putin shovels out were also 6 times more likely to believe that the war that Putin started in Ukraine was legitimate. Those who believed Putin's bull were also 2 times more likely to want to return to combat, and nearly half of those surveyed embraced the concept of the Russian world, which is an imperialistic ideology spread by Putin that promotes the inevitable dominance of Russia, which can often only be achieved through self-sacrifice. These results already show us so much about the events in Stepnohirsk. These soldiers who refused to surrender weren't just worried about Russian punishment and imprisonment on the back end. Putin's propaganda had likely indoctrinated them, just as it has so many of the POWs that Ukraine quizzed. They believe what their leader tells them, and they're willing to sacrifice themselves to make his vision a reality. On top of that, if Russia's elite soldiers had succeeded in Stepnohirsk and Putin had gotten his picture of the raised Russian flags, they would have become contributors to the very propaganda pipeline that had led them into the situation in the first place. Putin wouldn't have cared that they died if they had delivered the photo to him. The message would have been created, even if it was a complete fake. As important as gathering this type of propaganda that is supposed to show the indomitable power of Russia may be for keeping the military in check, it's even more important for Putin on a personal level right now. Why? Putin's reputation as the strongman leader of Russia has been taking a beating in recent months. We've been seeing hints of that in Putin's actions in recent weeks. As The Independent reports, Putin has appeared on Russian state TV to admit that his nation is facing problems in the wake of Ukrainian drone attacks that have left oil refineries throughout the country burning. As for strikes against critical infrastructure in general, and energy infrastructure in particular, of course these attacks on our infrastructure facilities create problems, that's obvious, Putin said during an interview on June 28th. Putin even acknowledged the fuel shortage that has resulted from Ukraine's attacks. A few weeks before this interview, Russia's leader also admitted that the military isn't advancing as fast as he would like in Ukraine. This isn't normal behavior for Putin. He is a man who almost never acknowledges Russia's failures, yet these statements are both blows to the image of an indomitable Russia that Putin wants to create using his propaganda. So why did Putin make them? He had to. It's impossible for even Russians who buy into Putin's propaganda to ignore the fact that Ukraine has seized the initiative in 2026. Those same Russians also can't ignore the fires on the horizon and the smoke in the skies being caused by Ukraine's drone strikes. For Putin, these admissions are a desperate attempt to appear as though he relates to the struggles that he's putting his people through. It's all propaganda, again. Just not the kind of propaganda that Putin wants to make. Still, it will do as a stopgap for now. What Putin really needs, and what he tried to achieve in Stepnohirsk, is a clear victory that he can push onto the Russian people. He wanted the Russian flag raised near Zaporizhzhia so he could say, "Look, we're making progress and Ukrainian settlements are falling." If Russia's elites had succeeded in Stepnohirsk, Putin would have been able to reset and start claiming battlefield victories again, however faked those victories were. But Ukraine took that attempt to create a false narrative and shoved it squarely up Putin's rear. It's not just that the Artan unit led Russia's elite soldiers into a trap in Stepnohirsk. The footage that has emerged from that operation is the true killer for Putin. Even if he had gotten his picture of the raised flag, the footage that followed would have dispelled every claim that he tried to make. Now, a leader whose power is built on the base of propaganda is floundering. Russia is burning from the inside. Putin's grip on Crimea is loosening due to a brilliant Ukrainian isolation campaign, and now, Putin can't even claim fake victories because Ukrainian forces are so adept at shutting his best soldiers down. This is a nightmare for Putin, but for Ukraine, combating this type of fakery is par for the course. Ukraine was so quick to release footage and provide details of what has really happened in Stepnohirsk because it knows that Russia has plenty of form when it comes to lying about battlefield victories. Hell, it even has very recent form that just goes to underscore Putin's desperation. On June 29th, Militani reported that Russia had sacrificed more of its soldiers, this time for a chance to get a picture of a raised Russian flag in Novoselivka, which is another village in Zaporizhzhia. Russia's 38th Separate Guards Motor Rifle Brigade was sent to do the job this time, but they failed under a storm of Ukrainian drones and an infantry response that led to the flag bearers being captured. If you have any doubt about how urgently Putin needs his propaganda victory, a second attempt for a fake flag raising in a month tells you everything. The end of 2025 also saw a storm of Russian attempts to fake victories, all to create the sort of propaganda that it attempted to generate in Stepnohirsk. Back in December 2025, UKR Inform reported that Russian invaders had attempted the same trick in Vovchansk, which is in the Kharkiv region. This time it was soldiers from the 57th Separate Motorized Infantry Brigade of Ukraine's 16th Army Corps that put a stop to the flag raising. And it doesn't appear to have been elite soldiers that Russia sent, but the idea was the same: sneak people in, raise the Russian flag, run away. It didn't work in Vovchansk. And Russia's fakery also didn't work in Kupiansk. Also in December, Russia flat out lied about taking the city of Kupiansk. No less than Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky traveled to the city and took photos to prove that Russia was talking nonsense. And due to a Ukrainian counterattack that followed, The occupiers who were in the city were quickly pushed out. Time and time again, Russia has been making false claims about gains, only for Ukraine to expose those claims for what they really are. The only difference in Stepnohirsk is that Ukraine took out the infiltrators before they ever managed to make their false claims in the first place. That's efficiency. And as it turns out, what Ukraine did in Stepnohirsk has been perfectly timed. Putin needs his propaganda victory for more than convincing the Russian people that his invasion of Ukraine isn't a complete dumpster fire. Putin also needs leverage. On June 23rd, Putin said, "Russia, however, as has been stated repeatedly, is ready for peace negotiations with Ukraine. It's ready to proceed on the basis of the agreements reached back in Istanbul, agreements which, I would remind you, were initialed at the time by the Ukrainian delegation." Take away the combative nature of these comments and what you see is a Russian leader bringing up peace unprompted. That's how you know that Putin is in trouble. He's playing the negotiations card again. The flag raised at Stepnohirsk was supposed to give Putin some leverage to use in these peace talks, assuming that they ever happen. Ukraine took that leverage away, just as it shredded every card that Putin had to play in a brilliant 2026 campaign that has clearly left Russia on the back foot. So the events in Stepnohirsk aren't just about taking out elite Russian soldiers and depriving Putin of a strategically important village. They're about much more than that. Putin is looking for a way out of the war he started. That's why he's talking about peace and acknowledging the effects that Ukraine's campaign is having on the Russian people. He's buying time to get his hands on fake propaganda that he can use to raise the chances of coming out of this terrible period with a chance at holding on to power and getting what he wants out of negotiations. Ukraine snatched it all away and made it abundantly clear that Russia is nowhere close to holding Stepnohirsk. Putin is running out of time. And as his attempts to create propaganda fail, panic reigns in the one piece of occupied Ukrainian territory that means everything to Putin. If you need any evidence that it's Ukraine that holds all of the cards in 2026, then just look at Crimea. Occupiers are fleeing across the Kerch Bridge to get back into Russia. Why? Well, you'll find out if you watch our video, where we break down Russia's situation in Crimea and what it means for Putin. And if you enjoyed this video, remember to subscribe to The Military Show to see more of our analysis of the latest developments in the Ukraine war. And thank you for watching.